everyone. Thank you so much for tuning in, whether you're tuning in live or you'll be catching us on the replay. Today is a very special episode with a very special friend who has an extraordinary story of fighting for survival and survivorship. And I mean, all of our stories are amazing, but his is just exceptional in so many ways. He is an amazing friend to me. He has been so supportive, so instrumental in me getting to where I am and being an advocate. He has always encouraged me in everything that I do. And not to give away too much of his story, but this is a very special time for him. He's 1 year from something that really changed the trajectory of his survivorship and literally saved his life. And we will get into what this 1 year celebration is. I am so happy. This is so huge. I am so excited. I just found out that this is what's going on in his life right now. And oh my God, I'm beyond words. I want to cry, all of it. I'm just so happy for Tim. My special guest is Tim McDonald, and he's a stage 4 colon cancer survivor and thriver and fighter. And oh my God, I have to use the word warrior, although we hate that word. But his story has proven that he really is this warrior. He just never gave up, and he fought for his life, and he advocated for himself. Now he's advocating for others. This is Blue Couch Chat. It's the safe place to talk about your shit. We will be talking about a lot of shit, a lot of livers, a lot of guts, a lot of colons, a lot of rectums, a lot of stuff today. And so just thank you for being here. I'm your host, Shannon Lee Sin. I'm a stage 3C colon cancer survivor. I am now 42. Still considered too young for colon cancer, but I was diagnosed at 29, stage 3C, after having symptoms since I was 17 years old. And I'm now a 12 plus year survivor. It'll be 13 years in October, so we're getting there. So thank you for joining us. And let's bring my special friend, my special guest, amazing person, Tim, on the stage. Hey, Tim, how are you?
I'm doing great. How are you, Shan?
I'm great. It is so good to see you always. You mean the world to me. And, this was supposed to happen last month and we had to reschedule, but it was Lori's birthday and it was special. And now I get to celebrate a special day with you. So
Yes.
This is awesome.
I'm a big believer that things happen the way they do for a reason. So we're all here because we're meant to be right now.
For sure. So tell us how you got here and why you're on Blue Couch Chat and how you're connected to colon cancer.
Yeah, well, I'm a stage 4. I was diagnosed in November of 2020, right when we were all still having fun with COVID, before there was vaccines, before there was, a lot of any home tests, I think, at the time. And, it was one of those things. I went to the urgent care and they thought something was going on, but wasn't sure what it was. So ordered a CT scan. The CT scan showed that I had cancer in both my colon and my liver, but I needed an immediate colonoscopy, or as quick as we could get one back in those days, because you needed to get tested at the hospital like 48 hours in advance. So surgeries were scheduled 3 days out. And I had my colonoscopy, my colonoscopy where he inserted a stent and made it where I could still be able to not have it close up completely and probably kill me. But the one thing that really kind of propelled me was just from that very first visit with the urgent care doctor, who knew that I wasn't a big person on going to the doctor. And he actually called and texted this GI surgeon, because they used to work in the ER together, and got me in there that same day within a couple hours. And from there, it was just like they referred me to a really good oncologist, even though I only saw him one time. But he gave me the best advice ever, which was, I encourage you to get a second, third, or 10th opinion every step of the way. And I'm not saying that to just keep getting an opinion until you hear what you want to hear, but you go until you get something that you believe. And so that advice has kind of helped me through this whole journey. And, even the oncologist right after I saw him that I only saw one time too, because I fired her, told me I had 3 years to live and was going to make my life as comfortable as possible. Well, if anybody's been on chemo, they know your life's not comfortable on chemo. So I'm like, I immediately in my head was saying, that's your story, not mine. I am going to fight this thing. I am going to figure out a way to get rid of it. And a few months later, I got immediately into Moffitt Cancer Center here in Tampa, which is one of the top 10 cancer centers in the US. And then I got involved in like Man Up to Cancer, which is a men's cancer support group. Joe Bullock, actually, who's the COO now, he actually told me, hey, because I messaged him and said, hey, I know we don't really talk about treatment options, but, what would you suggest for that? And he told me about Colon Town, and I got in Colon Town, and they have a whole bunch of different neighborhoods, if anybody's not familiar with Colon Town. And one of them was Liver Lovers Lane, which was basically for people that had colon cancer with mets to their liver. And so it happened to be February of 21. So just 2 months after, basically 2 months after I was diagnosed, and they were doing a Are We a Match kind of Valentine's Day theme, like the condition of your liver, the cancer in your liver compared to the different treatment options. And I went through each one going, isn't going to work for me. This isn't going to work for me. This isn't going to work for me. This isn't going to work for me. And then I got to a liver transplant, and I said, wait a minute, maybe this is an option for me. And it was the first time I really had hope that there was going to be something that could be done for me. And just ended up getting in touch with Dr. Hernandez up in University of Rochester in New York. And it took me quite a while from that very first consultation in July with him of 21. But in May 16 of last year, 2023, I received my liver transplant from my living donor, Beth Lipari, and I've just been NED now for just exactly 1 year as of yesterday. But we don't technically know, because I think it was like, I didn't wake up until this morning a year ago. But the surgery was like 17 hours. And so I've been NED since sometime on the 16th, but realistically, I think it started on today on the 17th.
I get you. Well, Tim, oh my God. So, first of all, I am so glad that you listened to your gut, as we always say, pun intended, totally intended. And also that you advocated for yourself. And then, those people that you mentioned, of course, they're near and dear to my heart, and I know how amazing they are. And so for you to form those friendships and find that support, and for them to lead you literally to your life being saved. And then for Beth, a total stranger, saving your life. So how exactly did you find Beth?
I'd like to say that I didn't find her. We found each other. And I'll say that because I was most colorectal cancer patients that pursue a liver transplant. There are a few centers that do cadaver livers, but very few. The majority do living donors. And if you're not familiar, your liver is the only organ in your body that will regenerate itself. So it's an amazing organ in addition to all the other stuff it does for us. And you can actually donate if you're 18 to 60-year-old healthy, mentally and physically human being who wants to give part of their liver away. And you'll only be missing it for about 6 to 8 weeks because it will regenerate to its full size in about that time. Surgery is just about as painful as what I went through. And you have a lot less energy because you only have 30% of your liver. I ended up with 70% of Beth's liver. So right after surgery, I actually had more energy than what she did. But, now she's got 100% of her liver back just, after a few months, and is doing great. And my wife and I are actually flying up to Rochester next week to visit Beth and her husband and see the transplant team and just thank everybody and for what they did. So that's like, and I never really answered your question about how we found each other. And I want to do that now. It's, I got to step back a little bit and tell you a little bit more, but I know at the beginning when you introed me, you said I've now become an advocate. I was an advocate right after I was diagnosed because I'm a firm believer that I sat there for the first couple days after I heard that I had cancer, and I said, everything happens in life for a reason. What is the reason here? And I didn't say it like, why, poor me, did this happen to me? I said it like, why did this happen to me? Like, what am I supposed to take and do with this? And it quickly became that I was going to become an advocate and encourage more people to get screened for colorectal cancer. Now, after I started pursuing my liver transplant and getting more involved in liver transplants and understanding that each colorectal cancer patient that was pursuing a transplant had to go find their own donor. There's no organization out there. There's no, like, everybody's like, oh, where are you on the list? How long is it going to take you to get one? Well, that's not the way it works. You are on the list, but just to give you an idea, if you're not familiar with how this onus works and how the MELD score works, you need a high MELD score in order to qualify to get one of the livers, because in the US we have a shortage of livers to be donated. So you need a higher score on a MELD score in order to qualify to get one of those. And when you do that, it's one of those things that um, we end up having mostly like scores of 6 and 7. Most people that qualify to get an actual cadaver liver are in the 30 to 35 range. So we're way away from that. We're years away from probably getting there. The cancer will probably kill us first. So we all have to search for our own donors. And as I'm getting involved in meeting other people who have gone through this or going through it, I'm sitting here going, okay, the average person usually has about 5 to 7 people that get screened to be their donor before they actually find their match. Now, out of those 5 to 7 people that aren't a match, what happens to them? They call in for that person and then they disappear. And I'm like, well, I understand some people are only going to call because they know that person and they're willing to do it for that person. But there's going to be a handful of those people that are probably willing to do it for anybody now that they know that they can become a donor. And so I started a site called Share My Liver with the whole intention of trying to make matches for people pursuing a living donor liver transplant, that it's a colorectal cancer patient. And so I've been advocating for, screening, for awareness, for funding, for changes in the laws that we have, and now for, also just for living donor liver transplants. I've been advocating for, getting more people aware to become donors and helping people navigate through the process, even as I was navigating through the process. And so many people told me, Tim, you need to focus on yourself and get your own donor before you can help others. And I said, no, that's not the way I work. I work in a way that I like helping others while I help myself, because that actually fuels me. It energizes me. And Shan, I found Beth because one of the other guys that I know who lives up in Rochester, when I was up there for my evaluation in Rochester, he was just starting his liver transplant process. He had just talked to Dr. Hernandez. He was, he was close to his year, so he's going to be able to start searching for his donor. And a little later that year, he ended up posting that he was looking for a donor. And a mutual friend of Beth, my donor, and his shared his post. So Beth saw his post, called to be his donor, and she wasn't a match for him. Now, the hospital actually had gone to Beth and said, we have somebody else who's in a very similar situation. Right. Would you be open to donating to somebody else? And she said, I didn't even know Jason. I don't care who I'm going to be able to donate to. And so that's when I got the call that I had a donor. My wife and I were actually on a cruise at the time when I got the call. And then 2 days later, I get a call from one of the other people that was pursuing a living donor liver transplant at a different location, and told me the day before this was announced publicly that she had a donor. that came from Share My Liver. It was one of my friends. And I got to tell you, I was actually happier about that news than learning that I had a donor. Um, but I actually became, and then when I found out who my donor was, it was because Jason, who I mentioned his name, he texted me a couple days later and said, "Congratulations, I heard you got a donor. Do you know when your surgery date is?" And I said, "Yeah, I just found out. It's May 16th." And he goes, "I have a feeling I know who your donor is. Would you like to know?" And I said, "Well, only as long as they're, open to it. I'm definitely open to it." And so he goes, "Let me check." And about 10 minutes later, he sent me another text, and it had Beth's Facebook profile and said, "Here's your donor. She wants to connect with you." And so when I got back from the cruise, we set up a Zoom call and we talked for probably an hour and 20 minutes and just felt like we knew each other for most of our lives after that call. And we've just, we just clicked. She's got a sense of humor. I got a sense of humor. We joke. She had so many t-shirts ready when she knew she was going to be a liver donor, that, we're talking about, partial liver club, liver transplant donor, liver donor transplant, all these different shirts about that. And I joked with her. I said, let's be honest, you just went to an estate sale, found somebody who was a liver transplant, donor, and bought all the shirts. And then you need to decided, oh, if I'm going to wear these, I actually need to become a donor, so that's how we joke with each other, and that's how we play around. And we just had a great time. Before, her and her husband are just, such amazing people. They, when I was up there for my pre-op, they opened up their house to me to stay because I needed to stay a couple extra nights to get a colonoscopy done right before my transplant. They opened their house up to me. She drove me to my colonoscopy. They're so kind. They actually drove us. We all drove in together the morning of the transplant. We had dinner the night before. So it's just like we've just become, really so close. And I got to tell you that, it's really a difficult feeling to express in words if you're not a transplant recipient, what it means to have somebody else's organ in your body.
Yeah.
It doesn't feel foreign to me, but I definitely recognize some unknown reasons why things happen sometimes. And I have a feeling it's changed me both, not only as having a healthy liver in my system now, but in a way that, just overall, I think things are a little bit different. We actually found out because we did one of the Guardian 360 tests before my transplant and after, that I now have a germline mutation that I picked up, that I didn't have before my transplant. So that probably came from having a new liver. So just little things like that are like, it's just a weird kind of feeling, but in a good weird, it's not like a bad weird. It's just a good weird, but it is something that I don't think I'll ever get away from. I think that's always going to be part of me.
I just want to say, Tim, first of all, I want to say thanks to Beth. And I'm hoping that at some point when we celebrate, transplant day or, whatever awareness, that maybe we can have both of you on together. It would be so awesome to meet her. I met you for the first time in person 2 months before your transplant, I'm realizing.
Yeah. Yeah.
And, I saw you, a couple months after. And the change in you was like overnight. Like you look like a totally, like you've always been you, but I can see the difference in you, not just because you're healthy, but also just the happiness that you found your purpose. And, when you were saying that, everything resonated with me because, that's how I feel about Blue Couch Chat and what we're doing right now. And
Yeah.
so it's like, I just started crying because I totally feel how you feel. And it's such a great freaking feeling, right?
It
When
is.
when you take what you've been through and you find a way to not just say, okay, I'm still here, but let me pay it forward and to really find your purpose. And I feel like you've really found your purpose and you're literally saving lives. through what you've been through. You saved your own, and then you're saving others, even while saving your own. And that's just the person that you are. And I want everyone to know that's why I love you so much and how special you are, and why I really wanted you on season one, because season one is all about my amazing friends who have inspired me to do this and who have encouraged me. And you've just been so supportive of me from the day we met and even before. Um, and so it just resonated with me. And it's so funny because when you said you didn't ask why me, I remember saying, well, why not me?
Yep.
You know, why not me? There has to be a reason. And it took me 12 years, but I feel like I finally found that reason. And it just feels so good. And like I'm looking at both of us and we just can't stop smiling. And it's like, and
Well, a couple years ago, when I was living in New York, I went to a conference and somebody gave me a card that had a quote from Lily Tomlin, and I might butcher it a little bit, but it's one that everybody's probably heard before. I always wondered why somebody didn't do something about this. And then I realized I was somebody.
yes.
And that is just it resonated so much with me. And, it's made me, physically be walking by things going, how could somebody have done this? And then like it just clicks in my head, like, wait a minute, I am somebody, right?
Right.
Like I don't need to call the police. I don't need to call our homeowners association. I can actually do something about this
Right.
and do it. And that's like the same way I felt when I learned that I had cancer. It was like, okay, we're going to find a way to beat this. But more importantly, what am I going to do with this? How am I going to turn, as I think you had up earlier, right? How am I going to turn this pain into purpose? How am I going to make sure that I impact other people's lives? And, I have had so many friends who have gotten screened, whether it be Cologuard or getting colonoscopies, some that have, many that have found polyps and had them removed. And they always say, you saved my life. And I said, no, I didn't save your life. I made you aware that you could save your life. You took the action. You got screened. You saved your own life. And I truly feel that way, right? Like I don't need credit for saving somebody's life. I just need to be the catalyst for them to take the action. And
Right.
that's where my reward comes in.
Exactly. Exactly. And you know, I have to bring it up today. This is May. I mean, it's your 1 year, anniversary of your life literally being NED, right? And we know that this can be life-saving and can lead to long lives after having stage 4 cancer. We've seen it in our friends who've had liver transplants as well. So that there's lots of hope, and this literally saved you, basically, potentially. And just seeing you, it saved you in so many ways. And then saving others because you're paying it forward. But, May is Mental Health Awareness Month. And this is the safe place to talk about your shit. And you did talk about Man Up to Cancer, and you know how I feel about Man Up to Cancer. We spoke about Colon Town. You know how I feel about Colon Town. Those are some very amazing organizations that have impacted both of us in huge ways. And Man Up to Cancer, of course, I'm not a man, so not directly, but directly by seeing the difference in you and my close friends, and the change and impact that two men who, just like you, saw a need and said, this is what I'm going to do. This is my purpose. I'm going to make the change. I'm going to fill the void. Right.
Mm-hmm.
So tell me, how did the cancer affect your mental health? Because this is Mental Health Awareness Month, and this is a safe place to talk about your shit.
Yeah, I think, I first want to preface by, and I'm not saying this to say I don't have any mental health issues, because I do. But it's something that I started working on, trying to improve my mental health about a decade ago, before I was diagnosed with cancer. And part of that has been meditation. Part of that has been breathing, part of it just been like a consciousness of who I am as a person, instead of what society and what our culture tells us we should be.
Yeah.
And so when I was diagnosed, I mean, I actually responded really well to hearing you have cancer. I mean, so I responded so well that that urgent care doctor that gave me the news, who was so helpful with me, thought something was wrong, like that he needed my wife to come get me and make sure I got home okay, or he was even willing to walk me home and make sure I got home okay. But it's just because I didn't have any negative, sad reaction to it, because I
Right.
knew in my head from all this decade of work beforehand that no matter what I heard and how devastating that news was, nothing I could do was going to change what he just told me.
Right.
And so why stress about it? Why get upset about it? Now, that being said, I handled that news very well. Moving through having cancer and the treatments of chemo, and I was on some pretty aggressive chemo regimens, especially at the beginning. I remember telling my wife, I don't know how much longer I can do this. I mean, I was on Folfox Fury every 2 weeks. And, when you're going through that, it is like, you know, I mean, I used to say, and when I say good and bad days, I mean like days that you felt like more than 50%, you know, of who you were. And nowhere near 100%, but over 50%, let's just say, because the other days were under 50%. I would have about 11 to 12 bad days and like 1 to 2 good days before I had to start this all over again.
Yeah.
And you do that, month in and month out for 6 months, and it wears on you. It wears on you mentally and it wears on you physically. And I just didn't know how much longer I could do it. Now I started telling him that I was starting to get some tingling sensations in my feet and, from the neuropathy. And he said, if you experience that again, let me know. And the next time I experience it, and he said, okay, we're taking that out. So I just went to full fury. And for the first few months, I told my PA, I'm like, I'm not trying to diminish the fact that I have side effects, but it's like a walk in the park compared to being on the full Fox Fury. So, but I think from a mental health standpoint, searching for a donor was probably the biggest emotional roller coaster I've ever been on in my life, because you don't have control.
Yeah.
If somebody calls into the hospital to the transplant team to be a donor for you, unless if that person lets you know what they're doing, you have no idea that they called. You will never know how many people called. You will never know who it was that called. You will never know the status, at least from the transplant team, because of HIPAA restrictions.
Right.
And so the only way you know is if the person tells you what's going on. And when they tell you what's going on, you try and be the catalyst and the squeaky wheel to get the information back to them if they're not hearing when they're supposed to hear it and everything. And me doing that with the transplant team is very challenging, because I need to be very careful what I ask for, how I phrase things, because otherwise they won't do it. And so it was just like, and then hearing somebody say, I don't know why I was good. I went through all this, and then boom, because you get somebody who is kind of your same blood type or a matching blood type, is
Right.
in good health, fits all the right height and body weight and everything. And I'm like, get my hopes up, because they told me that they called and they had a good call. They're going to go get their, I think first you get blood work done, then you get, a CT scan. And I'm like, okay, we're getting close. We're getting close. And then it was like all of a sudden nothing.
Right.
And that happened so many times where I'm like, what's going on? I mean, I had 2 people I know that were, I believe, I shouldn't say I know one. I'm not sure about the other one, but I had 2 that were, I believe, really good matches for me. And one, I just don't know what ever ended up happening. Just we had communication and then boom, nothing. And the hospital obviously won't say anything. And then another one actually had, because she lived up in Rochester, she got all the stuff done like within a couple of days, all the screening and everything, because they could do it there themselves.
Right.
And I got back from a trip. I knew that she had her final call like while I was on my trip. And I'm like, I'm not going to worry about it. And she was really good at communicating. So when we got back, I gave it a few days and I just emailed her and I said, hey, I know you were supposed to have your meeting last week and just wanted to follow up. And she's like, I just had a change of mind and I have a bad feeling about it. And I'm so sorry. I didn't know how to tell you. And I'm like, no, don't worry about it. And by this point in time, I was pretty good at handling that mentally.
Right.
Because it had happened so many times. And I knew that for whatever reason, whether it was the hospital said something, whether the person changed their mind, whatever it was, it just wasn't meant to be. I could not control them. I couldn't change, I couldn't convince them that this is what you should do because I don't believe in that. I don't believe that anybody should try and that's coercion in my mind. If I try and convince you to do something that you're not willing to do on your own. And so I'm like, I don't want to be that person. So I got a lot better because I had so much practice at it, but the times I was down, I really got in major funks. And I think the one thing about a transplant, and I've learned this afterwards, nobody talked about this beforehand. Nobody told me as I was getting discharged from the hospital. It was me asking is we know, and because you're NED too, almost any cancer patient that goes from having active cancer to NED has what we call survivor guilt, right? And survivor's guilt is just a fancy name for saying we have mental challenges with how we deal with the fact that we don't have cancer anymore. And so I had that coupled with the fact that I learned that almost every transplant recipient goes through mental issues. And I'm like, why isn't this part of our standard care then? If we know this is happening, why aren't our oncology, teams telling us, hey, we need to, if you're getting close to NED or we think you're going to get to NED, we need to have you hook up with one of our, mental health therapists. If you get a transplant, why isn't the transplant team saying we need to connect you with one of our mental, they make sure about your social, your mental and your finance before the surgery. Why don't we follow up with the mental aspect after the surgery? Right. And so that's been a real big challenge. But because of having groups like Man Up to Cancer and having formed some really good and close friendships with that group, I've had quite a few conversations with guys who have all moved from having, a lot of them stage 4, some stage 3 to NED and some long-term NED and how they process it and what they deal with. And, and that's helped me understand that I'm not alone in this. And, I ended up talking with a therapist. I have one more appointment with them coming up next month. And, we've talked, I think I've worked out a lot of the issues that I had. And I don't know, it's just something about the disease. It's something about moving from having the disease to not having the disease. It's something about having somebody else's organ in your body where you are living now because of somebody else gave part of their body to you. Those are all things that fuck with your head. And, it's not easy. That is the most challenging part of this whole thing for me. Physically, yes, it took its toll on me. It's still taking its toll on me, with arthritis and, and aches and pains that I have never had before. Right. But the one thing that is the most challenging part is the mental aspect of it. It's processing that. And I got to say, I've been thankful to have some very good friends, some very supportive people who have gone through this just like I'm going through it, that I'm able to talk to. So that's my biggest advice is, mental health is not going to fix itself if you don't reach out and talk to somebody else.
I agree. I actually think that we should be linked with mental health from the minute that we're diagnosed. Because, me being 29, being single, not having anyone but my mother, I love my mom, but we've always had issues because you can't have two bulls in the same pen, and we're definitely both bulls, although we're female. And me, I'm very strong-minded, very strong-willed, very stubborn, and I'm just like my mom. And so we love and hate each other for it. And so me going through chemo and me being, and then not only that, but the steroids mess with you too. Like that roid rage, like, and you don't even know what's happening. It just, and then you can't sleep, and then like you said, like you have days where you just want to just be in bed. You can't move. I needed help just to go to the bathroom, and then you go from being healthy to being like literally like near death and having to fight and claw your way back. So I really do agree with you that mental health should be part of that medical team from the beginning. You have an oncologist, you have a surgeon, you have a GI, you need to have a therapist and a psychiatrist in there. I mean, when I was going through this is 12 years ago, my oncologist was actually the one giving me antidepressants and anti-anxiety medication. So, I mean, that tells you that this should be happening. Um, so I agree with you, and that the survivor's guilt is real. I don't know if you saw, but like Tim Stone and I had an entire episode just talking about survivor's guilt after my birthday because I feel guilty just celebrating my birthday. Like, or like I'm happy to celebrate my birthday, but then I'm also crying in the middle of dinner because it's like I have friends who died, and right before my birthday, I went to Lee's, memorial, and then I had my birthday a few days later, and it was just I just wasn't in the mood, and this part, the survivorship part, I think is the hardest part. And you're right, they do not prepare us for this. It's like you go from your cancer ruling your entire life and just focusing on survivorship, and then you hear NED and you're like, okay, what the fuck do I do now?
Well, and you're, the other thing, and I've talked to my therapist about this too, right? Is like I was going for infusions every 2 weeks. I was getting my pump disconnected every 2 weeks. I was seeing my PA or my oncologist every month. It was just like this regular routine of what I did, the people I saw, the care that I was getting. And then it's all of a sudden like, oh, we'll see you in 3 months. And you're like, wait a minute. That was the 3 month scan was just every 2 months back when I was doing it. But it was like, there was a whole bunch of other stuff in between there. What am I supposed to be doing now?
Right.
Like this is what I got used to. This is what I mean, it's sad to say, right? But it's kind of my blanket, my security blanket. Where did that go?
Yeah.
I mean, where are the conversations I have with my amazing infusion nurses, right? Like that I got to do every 2 weeks. And it's like whenever I go back to my infusion place, which isn't where my oncologist and PA are, because I go to a separate campus for my infusions. So it's like sometimes when I'm there, though, if I go for like a CT scan or something there, I'll pop upstairs and just, ask the receptionist if I can go back and say hi to everybody because I just miss them, I mean, I really do miss them.
Yeah, I mean, I went from my entire, like you said, my entire life was chemo disconnect, scans, oncology, GI, all of this. And then I went and that for at least a week after chemo, you're not going to do anything. So seeing my friends and having a personal life revolved around my doctor's appointments. And then all of a sudden, those doctor's appointments, like you said, became 3 months, and then they became 6 months, and then they became a year. And I'm like, okay, but now I don't have a personal life because those friends eventually kind of disappeared because I was so young, they didn't get it. So now it's like my calendar is completely clear. And I'm like twiddling my thumbs, like, what am I supposed to do now? Because you go from your whole life being structured on fighting for your life, and then now you have your life to live, and it just feels so weird that because there's no smooth transition, right? It's like literally, like you said, all of a sudden you do that last chemo, and it's like all of a sudden you're in survivorship, and you're like, what does this mean? And then you're also like fighting for that end of 6 months of chemo, and then it happens, and you're like, that was so like anticlimactic. Like you expect like balloons and fireworks and this big party, and then it's just like, what do I do now?
Yeah.
It's like a big letdown. It's like this great, wonderful, action movie, and then all of a sudden you hear like violins at the end.
Well, see, I got to ring the bell, and they gave me a little bell to
I
bring
love
home.
it.
But that was like, that was it. That was
I
my
didn't get that.
celebration, And then I'm home and I'm like, oh, great. What do I do? What do I do now?
Yeah, I didn't even get that. I was like, oh, what do I do? And so I get it. I definitely want to go into sharemyliver.org. I know that you got your 501c3 status, which is awesome. I did go on the website and it is absolutely amazing. And to see the success stories and not just your picture, but that you've helped others. Just tell me about it. Tell everyone what you want them to know about sharemyliver.org. This link is down in the ticker. I've been
Yep.
putting it up for forever. Because Tim, I mean, what you're doing is just so amazing. And like I said, you found a void. It was something that you needed, and you realized others are going to need this too. And
Mhm.
you've said, I'm going to dedicate the rest of my life to helping others in the way that I had to help myself. And that is just so important because we know self-advocacy is important, but not everybody knows how to do that for themselves, right? How to do what you did for yourself. So tell us about it. I'm just excited
Well,
to hear
yeah,
everything.
no, well, thank you, Shan. I mean, it's so nice to, you put so much effort into something and sometimes you don't see, yes, I had one major success story and I've had a couple like that I indirectly helped. And, I mean, a lot of people that I indirectly help, but it's like kind of one of these things where it's like, it just feels like, why am I doing this some days? And so hearing that really helps kind of keep that energy up and that momentum going. But Share My Liver, like I had mentioned, started as a way for me to help match people searching for donors with potential donors.
Right,
And which was great. But as I looked at how could this evolve? How could this grow into something even bigger? I started thinking to myself as I learned about our transplant system in the US. And just to give you an idea, it's like 30, 40 years old. The players have not changed. It's all contracts given by the government, and it's all like red tape and bureaucracy. And anybody that knows me knows that I hate both of those things. So I am like, I just decided that instead of becoming a matching service, what I wanted to do was help ignite connections to make more donations possible, make
right,
more transplants possible. So there's three main functions that we do with Share My Liver now. The first is to create awareness that people can become living liver donors. That is number one. Number two is we help navigate people that are searching for a donor from before they're actually searching for a donor, through the time that they're searching for a donor, through the transplant surgery, and then even after. So
right,
we kind of help guide them with resources, with mentors, with people that have been through what they're going through to be able to talk with them, answer their questions. I have a couple blogs up now that just talk about the living donor liver transplant as an overall concept. I have one that talks about, like, if you're searching for a donor, different ideas on how you go about doing that the most successfully. And I'll continue to have more things out and do that. So that's like number two, is really helping the people, navigating through the transplant process. And then the third thing is, and really why we turned it into a nonprofit, is that I realized, because at the time I knew that, there was probably about 40 to 50 people. I was like in that 40 to 50, one of the first 50 people, let's just say, in
right,
America that got this done. It's only been done for about 6 years now. And what I've realized, because I know about 2/3 of the people, at least in the colorectal cancer space, who have gotten liver transplants, and every single person has been white. And now I'm not going to say and go into a whole bunch of things that I have all the data and know all the statistics, but what I do know through my advocacy work is a lot of the minority population, there's two factors why they don't do it. But one of the main ones is, a financial barrier, and the, we can get into lack of trust and everything like that, and the cultural differences and everything, but really financial is a big one for a lot of people. And so what I wanted to do, because if you get a liver transplant, even if your insurance covers the surgery, a lot of insurance plans won't cover your travel. And there's only, well, when I started, there was 14 centers in North America. Now there's about over 30 centers in the US doing this. So it's growing. But even in Florida, there's not one that's doing it right now. So I would, and you need to be an hour away from your transplant center for at least the first month to 2 months after your surgery. So when I had to go to Rochester, we had to stay in a hotel for a month. And that cost a lot of money. And you're still paying for your rent or your mortgage back home. You're still paying your utilities back home. Now you have to buy all new food where you're at and some supplies, and and then on top of that you got your medications and everything. So it's a pretty costly proposition to do. And some insurance policies will pay up to $10,000 for travel and lodging for a transplant, but many won't. And what I wanted to do was create a fund to remove the financial barrier from anybody that was a candidate to get a transplant, so that that would not be an issue.
I am so proud of you. And, it takes a special person who has not really experienced the disparities and inequities in healthcare that people like me experience to know that they exist, to speak about them, to acknowledge them, and to acknowledge that, I didn't have to deal with this, but I know that they exist, and I'm going to do what I can to help people to not have to experience them. Tim, that takes a really special person. It's one of the many reasons why I love you. We've had several conversations over the time of us being being friends, and we've spoken about so many things, and candidly and transparently. And another thing that I want to say is I will do whatever I can to help you with that fund. So you let me know what I need to do and how I can help you, and how I can help you with Share My Liver and get this out, because what you're doing is so huge, and you're doing it from the graciousness of your heart and paying everything forward. And it takes such a special person to do that. We've seen it in this space that there are people who do this not because they want to help others, but because of what they can get financially from supposedly helping others. We've seen that. And what I honestly believe is that it takes organizations like mine, like yours, these small organizations who fill a need, who care about people, who genuinely want to help people because we've been through it. It's going to take us to make the big difference. It's going to take the little people, the little organizations to make the big impact. I really believe in that. And I know, like, you kind of downplayed the difference that you're making. If you get one person to find a donor, you've made a huge impact, right? And that's one life. And I always say, if I even save one life, if I even get one person to do a colonoscopy, my pain has been worth it. You have paid for your pain and taken it and transformed it 100-fold already in what you're doing, and just in who you've been and who you are in the community, and the friendships that you formed, and who you've inspired, like me. Like, I don't think you realize the huge impact that you have just by being you. And I want you to know that,
Well, thank you. Yeah, it's one of these things that I don't do things for money.
Right.
I mean, obviously, I don't ignore the fact that we all need some money to be able to support ourselves and put a roof over our head and food on the table.
Right.
But, when I was in the hospital right after my transplant, they told me that for 3 months I couldn't work. I cannot tell you how many visitors and how many phone calls I had with people that were pursuing a living donor transplant or considering, getting a living donor liver transplant. And I remember one of the nurses was in my room waiting for me to get off the call with the guy who was asking me questions. I told him I'd connect him with Dr. Hernandez, which is my transplant surgeon at URM. We went through his condition. I asked him all this. I don't get into too much detail, but I just get a general overview. I know, like, you need to be in treatment for and respond favorably for a year. I know you need to have, the cancer confined to your liver to be a recipient. Those are some of the basic things. And so I just asked those basic questions, and he seemed like he would be a great candidate. So I connected him with Dr. Hernandez. And after I got off the phone call, the nurse said, "Oh my God, look at the smile on your face." And I said, I got a question for you. You guys are telling me I can't work for 3 months. What was I just doing right there? Was that work? Because it was me doing something for somebody else,
Right.
right? But I said, that's why I'm not on pain meds anymore. That's why I'm only taking Tylenol here, is because I have such a good feeling from doing things like this that it doesn't matter. You don't need to give me any pain medications. I just need to talk to more people that are interested in learning about liver transplants, and I'm going to heal myself.
Right.
That's all it's going to take. And
Yeah.
every day I get a phone call or I'm on with somebody, you can ask my wife when I am done with that phone call, if they are asking me about, transplants, if they're asking me about finding a donor, if they're asking me about getting ready for their surgery coming up, I will get off the phone and have the biggest smile on my face and the fullest heart that I've ever had.
I totally get you. And, because of everything that you said, I just want to go to the comments real quick and then we can wrap up. But these comments coming in, like, it just shows exactly how much you mean to everyone. So Sean Gibson says, "Hi, Shan. Hi, Tim. Hey, Sean."
On.
Christy Hart Holcomb, I don't know if you know her. She's also a long-term survivor. She, at the beginning, said, "I've been listening for 5 minutes and I've already learned 10 things about liver donation. Thank you."
And now we just need Christy to spread the word about those 10 things she just learned.
She will. I know she will. My friend Philip Mark says, "Darn, you're a stubborn girl. That's what I love about you."
I saw that come in right after you said that.
And then let's see, Wendy Russell Harp, she's our fellow Floridian,
Yeah.
Colin Congress warrior, marching those halls with us. Wendy, I love you
And
so much.
Climb for a Cure champion. Yep.
And now an ambassador this year, just like
Yeah.
you were with Fight CRC. She says, "Tim, this information is so helpful to so many. I'm beyond proud to know you and see what you are doing to help other cancer patients." I totally mirror that sentiment, Wendy. I totally agree. Tim is amazing. And just knowing him as a friend and a human being, I'm just honored to know you, Tim. We all are. Mary says, "That is amazing, Tim. Tons amount of work, but I know it's totally worth it," right?
Mm-hmm.
So, and then of course Tim Sohn, who hosts Perspectives on Cancer, showing up. I'm his co-host on Wednesday. He says, "I get you, fellow Tim. I know you guys have a whole bro thing
Oh,
going."
yes. Well, and plus we're both Tim. So.
Hello, Tims. I get it. I'm a little left out right now. I'm gonna say my name is Shannon Tim Lee Sims today, but just so I can fit
We'll just
in.
make you Shannon Lee Tim today.
Yeah. But you see, you've just made he says, "Shout out to the little people." I guess that's me.
When we're on here, we're all little, right?
But no, I'm really proud of what you're doing. And before we wrap up, do you have anything that you want to leave us all with? Tim caught on. Tim said, "Sorry, Shannon Lee Tim." There, that's my new title right now. Yeah, is there anything that you really want to give people as advice? Anything that you want to say you've learned and you want to pass on?
Yeah, I think they're kind of coupled together. So I'll just turn it into my one thing. But I think that the biggest thing is that you really need to advocate for yourself. And I say that because there I was brought up believing that people like my teachers, my doctors, anybody in a position of an authority was an expert.
Right.
And what this whole thing has taught me is there might be people that know a heck of a lot more than me in certain areas, but just because somebody's an oncologist doesn't make them an expert about everything about my cancer.
Right.
Um, I went to the ER, the urgent care, 3 times because I had bleeding after I was in treatment, and nobody bothered to look at my butt. You
Yeah.
promised we were going to talk about shit today,
Yes.
right?
Yes.
So I'm bringing it up. I went to a proctologist. In my first visit, I told him what was happening. He goes, "Oh, you probably have a hemorrhoid and fissures.
Yeah.
It's really common when you start having cancer, when you start going through chemo." And he looked and he gave me a little injection. He goes, "Okay, come back in 3 weeks and we'll give you another injection and you should be good to go." And I've seen him about 3 or 4 times in over the course of my time because I get hemorrhoids. I know when my hemorrhoids come back now. I didn't know they were hemorrhoids back then. But
Right.
that just goes to show you that here I go see one proctologist that it took me one ER and 2 urgent care visits where they didn't even come close to telling me what it was.
Yeah.
And it's the same thing like me getting a liver transplant. My oncologist would have never suggested. As a matter of fact, when I told him that I was going to be looking at a liver transplant, he said, "Where are you getting that done? That is outside the box."
Right.
And when I told him Rochester, he was like blown away. He goes, "The only place I think I've ever even heard of that is Cleveland Clinic."
Right.
And I'm like, "Well, yeah, they do it, and Rochester does it." And I said, "There's about 13 other places or 12 other places in North America that do it, but those do some of the most." And so that's what I say. It's be your own advocate, and don't consider any of your professionals in your medical team as the authoritative expert. You need to get a whole bunch of people that are really knowledgeable about the different aspects of your care on your team.
Yeah.
And nobody will do that for you. You need to do that.
I agree with you. Self-advocacy is what saved my life. I had all those telltale symptoms of
Mm-hmm.
colon cancer. At 17, I had a stomach ache every day and blood in my stool where it looked like I was hemorrhaging. And my doctor didn't do any scan or anything, no endoscopy, no colonoscopy, no digital exam, nothing. And said, "Take Zantac, you have an ulcer." It was bright red blood. And then fast forward now, so that was being misdiagnosed for 12 years. When I was having the real onset of all the telltale symptoms, like every single one, including the anemia and the fever and the fatigue and the nausea and the constipation and diarrhea, everything. They were looking at my reproductive system and they wanted to do a blood transfusion. And when I said, "What's my diagnosis?" They said, "Oh, it's probably your heavy periods." I was anemic and had a fever of 103. I said, "But that tells me that's an infection." "Oh, you probably just picked up a bug in the hospital." That's what I was told. 2 weeks
Mm-hmm.
later, I was in sepsis. You know, that's before I was even diagnosed. It took another 4 months. It was found during surgery. And, I take every opportunity I can to emphasize, especially being a Black person and being a young person, we feel that if we're sick, we're going to feel it or it's going to show on a scan. Let me tell you something. My cancer was 4 centimeters, stage 3C, started to spread to my lymph nodes. And guess what? It did not show on a CT scan. So therefore, do that freaking colonoscopy, please.
Mm-hmm.
There's nothing to be scared of. And if you have any reservations about it, please reach out to me because I'll tell you about how I did prep on a plane and I did not sit in the bathroom the entire flight because now I'm a pro according to my GI. The other thing, really, I went to the bathroom once on the plane and it was because of Tim Stone and going to his showing up. I was like, I have to do both. I'm not going to research my colonoscopy and I'm not going to miss this. So I made it work. But, the other thing that I have to say is that disparities exist and advocacy and self-advocacy doesn't stop once you're diagnosed and you finish treatment.
Mm-hmm.
Just last month, I went to the emergency room. And I don't know if everybody knows, I did post about it. I was extremely pissed. The doctor did a CT scan. I had blood in my stool. I had severe abdominal pain that really triggered and took me back all the way to before I was even diagnosed, was how bad the pain was. And I had blood. And this was for months because I was watching it off and on. And I said, and even at calling Congress, I had friends who were going to take me to the emergency room in Washington, D.C. And I was like, oh God, I don't want to be admitted out of town with nobody here. And the doctor looked at me and said, oh, it's probably just hemorrhoids, and was ready to discharge me at like 3 o'clock in the morning. 3 o'clock in the morning, he was ready to discharge me. I had 2 doses of Dilaudid, 2 doses of Benadryl, and he was saying that I could either drive my car home or take an Uber. But here's the disparity and inequity part, Tim, that I want you to hear about. He's brushing off my symptoms as a colon cancer survivor, saying that it's just hemorrhoids, didn't do anything other than a CT scan, didn't even read the scan because he's telling me, oh, I have a cyst in my ovary and I need to follow up with my gyno, on top of telling me that it's hemorrhoids. So he's contradicting himself. And then I said, so is that cyst larger or smaller than the last scan last year? And he's like, oh, you've had this for a while? And I said, yeah. So is it larger or smaller, to explain why I have more pain? He said, oh, let me go check. Yeah. That was 4 lines down on that report. He did not read the report, but he's discharging me and putting my life at risk and brushing me off. And then now I'm getting the results from that emergency room visit. He didn't test me for anything, but you know what he was testing in my blood and in my swab that he did of my vagina? Every kind of STD possible. Do you want to tell me he does that to every patient that doesn't look like me? Do you want to tell me that if I didn't look like me, he would have pushed me out of that emergency room at 3 o'clock in the morning to drive home and possibly kill myself? And that's sad. That is sad that I still ended up in the hospital 2 days later, because the next night, the pain was so excruciating. I was praying to God that I would make it through that night. Went to the emergency room the next morning and was admitted for 2 weeks. And now I'm on a fentanyl patch full time for the pain that has not gone away. After that, doctor brushed me off for hemorrhoids. And so this is why I do what I do. And you hear the passion in my voice. Yeah. Because I'm still having to fight for myself. And now I'm still fighting for others, because these are the type of doctors why we die. These are the type of doctors why we're losing young people. And this is why we do what we do, right? Mm-hmm. So, I just wanted to make that point. I haven't really gotten to talk about that, so I'm sorry that I just blasted it all out like that. But it makes me angry, because if it's still happening to me, then how many people is this happening to?
Absolutely. Absolutely.
So let's really just go back to the comments, and then I'll wrap it up. I know you probably have to go. So your fellow Tim says, just quoting you really need to advocate for yourself. It's so true. Self-advocacy saves lives. We can't depend on doctors to fight for our lives the way that we will. Shout out to colonoscopy prep on planes. I have to agree. That has been such a great show, Tim. This has been so much fun. I hope you feel the same way. It's just been, and you know what? You've been worth the wait.
Well, I just can't believe we've gone an hour. It felt like it just started.
It goes fast. The hour goes fast. I've been having such a hard time keeping it down to an hour because it goes so fast. But you've gotten so much information in. And here's a really long comment from Brittany. Their illness, drugs, and injection can't cure. I've seen the great importance of natural remedies and the wonderful work they've done in people's lives. I've read many testimonies online on how they were cured from various illnesses and viruses. So I decided to contact a herbal specialist and found Dr. Godsent, a great healer. I love that name. I ordered medicine for diabetes type 2, hernia, and high blood pressure. I used them as he prescribed, and it worked perfectly for me. Today I'm healed and living a healthy life now, thanks to Dr. Godsend. I am so glad that you found an alternative way to heal yourself, Brittany. And I do believe in that. I do believe that traditional Eastern medicine as well as Western medicine can work together. And we need to consider that, and natural remedies. Mary's showing the prayer hands. And she says, I'm the best. Tim is the best too. I mean, Tim, you have been so wonderful this evening. And I am so grateful that we made this happen, that you made this happen. And I can't imagine having season 1 without you. I'm just, you see it. I'm just so happy to have you on here. I appreciate your friendship. I appreciate you. I am so proud of you, and I'm so happy you're still here, because you know what? You have so much freaking work to be done. And she says, advocate and speak the truth. And I love you, Tim. So I'm gonna wrap up, and then I'll come back and see you, and we'll wrap up a little bit. But I love you, and happy 1 year freaking liverversary. Is that a word?
I made it once, or transplant versary.
I wish you many more. Please give Beth a huge thank you from me and from all of us. Um, I, it takes a special person to do what she did, but
Yeah.
it takes a special person to help a special person, and you deserve all of it and the best. And just seeing how much it's changed you and how happy you are as your friend, and seeing you every time I see you, I just glow from your glow, like your glow up is real. So I love you, and I'll see you in a couple minutes. Take care. Hello, everyone. Thank you so much for watching. One last comment. Tim times two and Shannon, hearts to you all. Hearts to you too, Mary. I love you. Thank you for encouraging me and showing up for me all the time on both shows. I love you. And Tim, you're my bestie, my bruh fam. I love you. All the glows, bruh. You too. For everyone who watched and everyone who will catch us on the replay, thank you so much for tuning in, for supporting me, for encouraging me, for being there for me. I hope I've helped you as much as all of you have helped me. If you want to continue to help me, what you can do is, I don't need money. Here's my ask. I need you to like, comment, share, and click subscribe. And please tune in from week to week. I love you. This is my happy place. This is what I believe my purpose has been. And if you want to be on the show, please, please, please reach out to bluecouchchat@outlook.com. I am going to share that link right now for the email. See, this is why I need Tim Sohn, because he's really good at doing this for me. But here we go. bluecouchchat@outlook.com is the email. Just send me a snippet of your story, a headshot, and let me know that you want to be on the show, and I will try to make it happen. It's all about scheduling. I love you very much. Thank you so much for tuning in. Please remember, advocate for yourself. See how you can help others. Get out and thrive. Live your life to the fullest. We only have one life. Don't live to die. Die to live. And just push yourself to do things that are out of your comfort zone. You never know how happy it will make you. And helping others is the best feeling in the world. I love you. I can't wait to see you. Hang in until next time. We have a very special, great guest again next week, and he'll tie everything together for the season. I love y'all. Take care.